MyFantasySportsTalk.com.
Last week on My Fantasy Podcast.
I'll say this, Tony Romo will win a tournament before Tiger Woods does.
Nah, I don't know about that. Not on the PGA Tour. I'm not going to go that far.
I already went there. It's been gone.
Well, you went there, don't you? You're not speaking for me whatsoever. So I'm not going there. But he does have skill. You are correct about that. You were correct, sir. Just promise me if you have a dream about me, good, bad, whatever, let me know, because I'll probably just stay in the house for a few days. Play it safe. But anyway, and you know what Quan Elliott says here? He didn't say it, but what he's thinking is because they're playing the Warriors and they're going to get swept. Me and Quan are on the same page here. Believe that.
His profile picture is James Harden.
Oh.
I was just making
He's going to be wrong.
He's a Warriors guy. Yeah, I think he's talking about the Warriors there, but I had to get that.
Quan. Come on, Quan. Show me the Quan. Man, you disappoint, man. Whatever. Hey, and maybe that's why we got so many ladies that know what they're talking about, because they're watching all the sexiness that goes on this podcast, and they're well informed. Just a theory, but it's a very plausible theory. My Fantasy Podcast peeps, another episode going down for you right now. Appreciate you for joining us. I am Brandon Reed, your host for the podcast and lead writer for MyFantasySportsTalk.com. I'll bring in the man that founded this whole thing, the man, Dan the Man Chalk, in just a minute. Real quickly, the rundown for today's show, huge show, jam-packed. We're talking everything from baseball to boxing. So, we got the whole spectrum covered for you. Some of the things we don't normally talk about out here on the podcast, baseball and boxing, but we're going to get to it. Thanks for joining us live on YouTube. Of course, check out the replays on YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, WBLZ, WBLZsports.com, SPN Sports Podcasting Network.com, and of course on our website, MyFantasySportsTalk.com. So quick rundown today. What we're going to do is go through our news whip around segment, a couple of things to talk about there, talk a little Tony Romo, talk some New England Patriots and their schedule and Vegas odds, and a new phenomenon I want to talk about is this. I'm calling it the new flopping, and something a lot of you guys probably know exactly what I'm talking about. You've seen it all playoffs long. James Harden's pretty good at it, but we'll get to that in just a second. But also, NBA playoffs going on. We got 2 sweeps. We got 2 series tied at 2-2. So we'll see how that goes down, talk about that, discuss that, bring our man Orlando Torres into the podcast here in just a moment to talk about his San Antonio Spurs and these playoffs. We're also going to talk about a couple of guys that opted out already. Kyle Lowry and Rudy Gay said they probably had enough of their current/former team, so we'll talk about that. And also talk about the most likely or best landing spot for Kyle Lowry. Pretty good top point guard commodity there that will be becoming a free agent. So that, we're also going to start our NFL draft prep, getting you ready for our live NBA draft show. That is. We did the NFL live draft show, of course, and that was a hit, big success. Appreciate you guys for joining us for all 4 hours of that. We're going to do it NBA style too, coming up June 22nd. So we're going to start preparing you for that, and we're going to talk about a piece Dan put out today, and we're going to start out real slow and simple for you guys. We're going to start out with the players returning to college, so you ain't got to worry about these guys come June 22nd. They're going back to school. We'll break down that list of Dan's and start out this prep. The NBA draft prep coverage for you leading all the way up until June 22nd, which is pretty soon. Just got a few more weeks to discuss NBA basketball before the NBA draft. NFL mailbag questions coming in. We're going to talk best free agents still available, and we're going to do our own NFL top 10 mock fantasy draft here today. Who is our top 10 when it comes to that fantasy draft? And in road to my repeating as champion of the MyFantasySportsTalk.com Fantasy League. We're going to talk boxing. It's boxing time. Best time to talk boxing, of course, with the Canelo Alvarez and Chavez Jr. fight that went on last Saturday. Before that, it was Anthony Joshua and Vladimir Klitschko in the heavyweight. So a good time to talk boxing and the state of boxing. We'll do that and bring our own Ryan Thomas of Thomas Take into the fold there. He'll join the podcast, talk about that. And we're going to talk MLB baseball and answer some fantasy baseball questions. So huge show today. We're going to cover it all. Got something for everybody on today's show. Thanks for joining us again. Let me bring in that man, our founder, editor-in-chief, president. You see Des the Kitty on the podcast all the time. Two loving pets there, Des the Kitty, Romo the dog. Romo the dog spending a lot of time outside now. He's getting into nature like the real Tony Romo, trying to swing the golf club. So he's spending a lot of time on the grass in the backyard. But hailing from the Buffalo area, he is Dan the Man Chalk. What it do, man? Another podcast. Here we go.
Yeah, excited for another one. Dan is a little under the weather. I'm getting a little sick. I mean, that's what happens when it's May in Buffalo and you're stuck in the 40 degrees. So, I got to deal with it. It's been rainy. It's been crappy, and I feel the same way. So we're going to power through. I feel kind of like sports. This kind of sports time is a little bit dull. There's not a lot of breaking news going on, nothing too exciting. We're just waiting for the Cavs Warriors, I guess, to happen. But I feel that way. I feel kind of just.
I'm glad you admit that you finally have come around that's going to be the title.
Yeah. I mean, I just hope the Cavs can double it up and not allow that Warriors super team to take it. But we're going to power through, and I think Brandon, give you props. You put this show together, and it's jam packed, even for the beginning of May when sports is kind of in that lull.
Yeah, it wasn't easy either. I'll tell you that, because we're talking boxing and baseball. We're fielding fantasy baseball questions in early May. How about that?
Well, hey, and that's props to our listeners, because fantasy baseball was the most asked question this week. With that lull, a lot of people want their baseball knowledge, and it's right in the prime thick of fantasy baseball season. We know the regular baseball season is long, but you got to win early on in the season to make the playoffs. So we're here to help you do that.
Well, as I've been saying all along, I welcome it. I welcome the viewers to send us those fantasy baseball questions. Help me help you, but not only just help you, help me with these questions, because I learned a lot about the New York Yankees today and breaking down their team and the success. I mean, I knew their record was good, but I didn't really know the depth of the level of success they're having. So mailbag question coming your way about the New York Yankees coming up. We'll get into that. So, but boxing, me, you, Dan, we're going to bring in Orlando here in just a minute. And of course, Ryan Thomas is going to join the podcast. So not only jam-packed with topics, jam-packed with guests.
Yeah, kind of like the people who were listening last week. I mean, we kind of mentioned it, how we're going to be bringing more guests onto the show, and today kind of shows that we're gonna jam pack our shows filled with, like you said, not only content but new voices to talk sports here on the My Fantasy Podcast. So I'm looking forward to it, especially because as we'll find out when we get to that boxing segment, I could care less. Boxing to me died long ago. So you're going to need some new voices, because mine's going to be pretty simple and cut short there.
So you said boxing died as far as you're concerned a long time ago. So we're on the same page there, Dan, but let me ask you, were you ever really a big boxing fan?
Not really. No, I can't ever claim to be a boxing fan. I mean, I did. I think I was allowed to stay up once for a Tyson fight when I was younger growing up. But besides that, no, I never really got into it too much. And sadly for somebody in their late 20s, this I think goes for a lot of people. They don't. That age group never really got to see a true boxing legend. Tyson was probably the last one, and he kind of died when I was, well, not died, but his career kind of fizzled out.
He's probably come close a time or two.
Right, yeah. So he was fizzling out when I was probably hitting 10 to 13 years old. So I never really got to learn and grasp the sport of boxing as being enjoying to watch.
Yep. I get it. And I agree with you. It's been a long time since it's really been relevant. And that's kind of the discussion we're going to have today with Ryan Thomas and Orlando Torres if he sticks around for that. I know the Spurs got a big game coming up at 7 Central Time.
Yeah. Hey, tied series. It's looking like it's going to go down to the wire. And I think both of our prides are on the line. You see, and I did the respectful thing, Brandon. I don't know if you know this. You called me out after Game 3. The Spurs put a whooping on the Rockets. Game 4, Rockets tied up that series. I was silent. I let Houston do the talking there. I didn't bring up anything. I was being very professional about it. I'm trying to rebuild that type of relationship with you because you've tarnished it.
No, it's all for show. It's all for show. We got to have something to really go back and forth at because a lot of times we agree, and a lot of times we're heading into showdowns in these fantasy championships. So we both know what we're talking about. Sometimes there's got to be some sort of disparity there. Yeah,
it's odd. I think that may have thrown me off a little bit because we do tend to agree on a lot of things. I like it. I welcome it, but at the same time, I was gonna lay low Game 4 because I'm gonna come back Game 5 and 6 strong.
Well, and you better, because here's the thing. I know why you were laying low. They just tied it up. You were predicting a sweep, and then you backed off to 5 games.
That was just gibberish. But I all along I've said Rockets and 6, so they got to pull out 2 more in a row.
2 in a row. Well, actually, it would be 3 in a row.
3 in a row, yeah.
So I don't know about that, man. It's looking like it probably will go 7. I don't know. But tonight is huge in that series. So we'll bring Orlando in just a second and talk about that, dive into it a little bit deeper. But right now, let's do that news whip around and talk about some of the hottest topics in the news in sports world going on over the last several days. So one of the things that really stuck out to me is something we talked about and mentioned last week. I want to bring up your boy. He had saying he was about 4 or 5 strokes or so off the pace. So while he did shoot a good round at 75, he was a little bit further down the standings. And apparently the way these qualifiers work, that was just like one leg of it. So if he would have done good and qualified there, he would have went on to like a next leg of qualifying. So it's hard. I mean, Tony Romo, he shot a pretty good score, but obviously it's not real easy to qualify for a major event or just a PGA event, period.
Yeah, I think that goes to show how difficult it is to make it in the golf world just on the PGA Tour. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned last week, Brandon, how many people were qualifying. We were kind of shocked at the number of how high it was, and now I think you kind of see why, because not only is it difficult, but there's multiple legs to even qualify. So, while I give him props to, for even attempting it for qualifying, I thought who knows, maybe he would. He did shoot a decent score. But being retired now, being in that CBS broadcast booth, it'll probably give him a lot more time. Des heard talking about Tony, and
was he saying, "Come back to football? Come back to football, Tony."
She wants him. Yeah. I mean, Des would love those passes. So, but yeah, I mean, he's going to have a lot more time to work on his game. So maybe he can improve, at his age. He took some years off, as mentioned last week, how he hasn't really played consistently since 2013. So he's probably got to get back into the swing of things. But I expect him to keep trying, keep going out there, seeing if he can qualify for the tour or just play in, even pro-ams or something like that. I think you're going to see him more active on the golf scene. And for CBS, I heard he's going to be, eventually commentating on golf. So that's another area of expertise. If he can show he's, decent, maybe qualify for an event or two, it'll help his broadcast career probably too.
Well, now that's where I see Tony Romo, because we talked about this before in the personality and Good Lord, I don't even know if we talked about this last week, but we have recently found that Jay Cutler has been hired by Fox as an analyst. Who wants to see Jay Cutler? That is just stupid, okay? I mean, you can have a little bit of personality, and as I said, I've never seen Jay Cutler laugh in 15 years, and that's the absolute truth. I haven't. But anyway, Tony Romo is not just. I don't know. Of course, neither one of us really know him personally, but he is a little bit more shy, reserved type of person. He's not a loud, flamboyant personality, which kind of suits football. But his reserve style may be better for golf. I mean, that actually might turn out very well. So I mean, he's got several options there, and I think he'll do okay in the booth. Jay Cutler, not so much. Not really excited about this at all.
Yeah, I actually I heard Jay Cutler do an interview on Fox Sports Radio. It was Doug Gottlieb filling in for Colin Cowherd, but he interviewed him, and I don't know if you heard this, but it was honestly, it sounded like a paper bag talking. It was just so dull and bland. Mm-hmm. He was talking about hunting trips and different things like that were just kind of strange. And he's like, I don't know if I can say this on air, but I'm gonna go shoot a bear. And it was just weird, and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I like what Fox did, putting him in with two other people to combine, Kevin Burkhardt and Charles Davis, to combine a three-man booth, because if you rely on him as your only color analyst, I think you're going to struggle.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I just barely caught a clip of that in passing, and I meant to go back and watch the whole thing because I was very curious about how that turned out, because I think that was the first really extended comments that I've heard from Jay Cutler since it was announced that he was going to be in the broadcasting booth. So I wanted to go back and take a look at that. I just didn't get a chance, but you pretty much just told me what it's going to all be about. Kind of what I expected. So, maybe I won't even waste my time, but I just don't get it, man. I don't get it. I don't get how he even fits that role. I mean, are we even sure that he was a great analyzer of the game? I mean, you could debate his level of success in the NFL. Are we even sure that he even knows what he was seeing out there on the football field? How much is he going to bring to the commentator table?
Yeah, I mean, you would hope a quarterback who's lasted that long would be able to tell you maybe through the quarterback's eyes what he's seeing. I mean, the biggest pro that I've seen for Jay Cutler being hired by Fox was that a lot of outlets that I've read were, well, Jay Cutler could have went to Vanderbilt without a football scholarship, meaning he's smart up top. So that could be true, but that doesn't necessarily translate to television. And performing on top of in front of a camera, so we'll see. But he supposedly is a smart guy, and maybe he can translate what he experienced in the NFL. I mean, it was an odd career going from Denver to Chicago and different aspects like that. So it'll be interesting. I actually am interested to watch a game and to see how he is, because I think it could be a complete meltdown, kind of like maybe a Dennis Miller on Monday Night Football type of thing, because that was absolutely terrible. So Jay Cutler could be in that mold, but at completely opposite end of the spectrum.
Oh, that's another thing I did want to mention. I was going to mention that he did go to Vanderbilt, so I'm not saying there's not an IQ there, but I'm pretty confident that the personality is not there. So, not really looking forward to that at all. I don't get it, man. I don't get it, me personally. But hey, whatever. I think he had a better chance of doing that or getting looks and making money doing that than apparently playing football in 2017. So, but anyway, all that to be said, just to come back around to the opening topic of debate here, the opening statement of what we're talking about is Tony Romo did fail to qualify for the U.S. Open, in case you weren't paying attention, but he did, like I said, he shot a 75, just 3 off par. So not bad. He is a pretty good golfer. So let's talk about next what I saw today, Dan, and I know you usually keep an eye on what Vegas is doing and place a wager here or there. So I don't know if you caught this, but the New England Patriots, or first of all, any team, this is an astonishing, but they are the only team this coming year to be favored by Vegas, and I got this from a Vegas sportsbook, CG Technologies, that they are the only team to be favored in every single game coming up this year.
Yeah, somewhat surprised to see that. I think maybe throughout the course of the season, you might see that change due to injury or how the team's playing. But for
Or
the
how other teams are
preseason,
playing.
exactly, yeah. But in the preseason, it's a little shocking. But I look at the over under win totals, and I think they have the Patriots around like from where I've seen 11.5 to 12.5, which I think is pretty accurate. I mean, when you look at the Patriots this year. I think they upgraded their team from a Super Bowl winning team that they had last year. So that's the first part.
Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, and I mean, not even just some of the like Coney Ely getting him, getting Mike Gillislee from the Bills, who I don't think is really anything, but you're taking away from another team in your division.
Right. Sometimes that's what it's about, because I think they stole another player from the Bills too, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Stephon Gilmore they signed in free agency.
Yeah, right.
That big deal. So, I think their defense has gotten better. Like you mentioned, Brandon Cooks adding to Edelman and Hogan and an up-and-coming Malcolm Mitchell. So I think it's accurate. I think the Patriots do have a chance to probably go 13-3, 14-2 as usual, I guess. I mean, it's kind of on par for what they do every single year. So, I mean, I would bet the over on that one if I was going to take it.
So what I wanted to do next is just kind of go through their schedule in case you haven't got a chance to look at it yet. So they start out the season versus Kansas City. Big showdown, game 1. Are we even sure that they're going to win that game? It is in Foxborough, but that's a pretty good showdown for week 1.
Yeah. I mean, I think week 1 games, they try and, make that a marquee matchup. And I think they've battled the last 2 years in the regular season, Kansas City winning 1, New England winning 1. So it could be a toss-up. Andy Reid is always has a game plan for Bill Belichick. So it'll definitely be an interesting one. And who knows who's going to be at quarterback for the Chiefs? Will it be Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes? Most likely Alex Smith, because as stated, Mahomes won't be ready, but you never know. Injury, a camp battle. Mahomes comes in, looks like the next Russell Wilson. So that'll definitely be an intriguing game.
So the next game, they'll be at New Orleans. Pretty safe to say that New Orleans probably won't have it together by week 2, right, Dan? The New England Patriots have to go in that game favored.
Yeah, I would definitely assume so.
And so the next game, they're back at Foxborough week 3. They're going to be taking on the Houston Texans. So, that was a playoff. That's a playoff rematch, isn't it? Isn't that who put out Houston? Yep. So.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, they're definitely going to be favored at home. Any home game, I think, 100% they're going to be favored at.
But they will be tested, right, against that Houston defense.
Run defense, yep.
That's a squeaker too. That's a pretty tough way to open up, with 2 out of 3 playoff teams in your first 3 weeks. But we'll see in your same conference, nevertheless. And then we move on. They'll play the Carolina Panthers in Foxborough. So again, they play 3 of their first 4 games in Foxborough. So I think we probably agree there they'll take down the Panthers, should be favored anyway. But then they go to Tampa Bay, which I think will be a much improved team. So would you agree that is the game they possibly could drop? It's not an easy one.
Yeah, and I could even see them if Tampa Bay starts out hot. I mean, they have a ton of offensive weapons. You had O.J. Howard, Deshaun Jackson, just to name a couple. So, yeah, I could definitely see if Tampa Bay starts out hot, maybe – New England loses a couple of those games to those good teams, and I can see.
Did they take one of the stud tight ends too, Dan? I don't remember offhand.
O.J. Howard, yep.
Yeah. Yep. So, look at I say watch out for Tampa Bay. I think they're going to make the playoffs this year for sure. But yeah, the one to look out for. So then next is up next will be the Jets. I mean, it's at MetLife, but we'll move on. We'll move on from the way Dan reacted. We'll move on.
That's all you got to say is the Jets.
But then October 22nd, Super Bowl rematch in Foxborough. A little bit of revenge on the Falcons, you think?
They're going to be pumped up for that game, that's for sure. I think all week leading up to that, all they're going to hear about is that 28-3. And I mean, it's just going to get pounded in their heads even more so than it already has this off season. So yeah, they're going to be fired up to come out to that game to make a statement.
Yep, I agree. So then another game at Foxborough, man, they're heavily loaded at the front half of this season. They're going to take on the Los Angeles Chargers. They'll be favored, no doubt. We're not going to dispute that. I don't know if that'll be a tough game if the Chargers will have it together by then or not. So then November 12th, they'll be at Denver. That's always a battle. That's always a game you could potentially lose. So that's another one to circle on the calendar as a possible L, right, Dan? I mean, it'd be close. I don't think the spread would be too much.
Yeah, no, I mean, they've beaten them before. And if you get solid quarterback play, who knows, it'll be under center for the Broncos. But yeah, definitely anytime that with that defense and pass rush coming after Tom Brady, it's going to be a challenging game.
Paxton Lynch, to answer your question. Then at Oakland, the Oakland Raiders. So we'll see. Good team. Then they'll be back at Foxborough against Miami. And then at Buffalo, December 3rd. So they played Buffalo twice in a 4-week period, Dan. They open up. They'll go to Orchard Park on December 3rd and then meet them again on December 24th, Christmas Eve. Any chance that Buffalo gives them a game in either one of those games?
No.
Okay, we'll move on. In between those, sandwiched in between those Buffalo Bill games is a game at Miami and at Pittsburgh. Ooh, do you expect them to get through that patch?
Yeah, I mean, the Pittsburgh game it will be tough. Miami always does play them tough as well. They're their next closest division rival, I guess you would say. And Big Ben in December, I guess you never know there. That'll probably be a high scoring affair, I can imagine. They don't have an easy schedule to be in the preseason favored all the way, but they are the Patriots. So you got to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Well, what I do like about their schedule is, like I said, they're very heavily loaded with home games in the front half of the schedule, and then they end up with the Bills, Dolphins, Bills, Jets in 4 of the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, so you get through that first part at home, yeah, they're going to be pretty golden. That's when you put it like that towards that end, to end that way is pretty solid.
Yep, a lot of their tougher games are in Foxborough, including that Super Bowl rematch against the Atlanta Falcons. So that is the New England Patriots schedule. Vegas says they're going to be favored, so put 2 and 2 together that they should go undefeated according to Vegas, or at least that's the way the money should fall when we get to the 2017 season. Let's move on and talk about a quick topic I want to talk about, something that's been driving me crazy, and we'll get Orlando in here in just a second. I want to get his opinion on this as well, but I'm calling it the new flopping, guys. You guys know what I'm talking about. So what it is, I was talking about this with Dan earlier, is that what this is a foul is called when a player is clearly not shooting the ball, but then the player just chunks up some kind of shot towards the goal, and the referee gives them the shots and saying it was in the act when it's clearly not, in a realistic basketball terms. I got a clip I'm going to show for you in the edited version, the final version of the podcast that we'll put online, put on YouTube, and put everywhere else for you. I'll show the clip of Gordon Hayward the other night. Gordon Hayward was coming off a screen probably 24 feet away from the basket, and he gets a foul call coming off the screen and then just throws up a wild 24, 25-foot shot, and they give him 3 free throws. You've seen James Harden get away with this a lot of times. I'm not saying it's not really clever, and if I was a basketball player, and even growing up as basketball, I would try to do it as much as I can, but not from 24, 25 feet, because it's just not realistic. So I want to see this addressed in the offseason, and I even heard Jeff Van Gundy mention it a little bit the other night in a broadcast. This has to be officiated a lot more tighter, a lot tighter than it is right now. You have to use some realistic basketball knowledge and know that the player wasn't shooting. And a lot of times they give them free throws to the goal, but they weren't trying to shoot the ball towards the goal. And some of these ones that are 24, 25 feet, come on now. I know James Harden can hit the shot. I know Gordon Hayward can hit the shot, but coming off a screen, that's not a natural shot. You're not shooting. So it's driving me crazy. So I want to talk to other people about it for some therapy here. Orlando Torres has joined the podcast, and I know you've probably seen this real closely in the series playing your San Antonio Spurs, Orlando. And let's be honest, a lot of James Harden's production is coming from the free throw line. So what do you think, Orlando, about this new trend in the NBA? I'm calling it the offensive flopping, the shot flopping. I know you know what I'm talking about. What do you think about it?
Yeah, no, I think that goes into discussion of what makes the game a little bit less unenjoyable. You see that a lot in time to time. You're starting to see a lot more in the postseason as well. And I love James Harden as a player. There's no questioning the talent, but a lot of times, yeah, you look for a player, and it's not just Harden; it's a lot of other guys where they'll just shoot up a shot, and they're just constantly looking for a whistle.
Well, yeah, and the one I was talking about was Gordon Hayward, which is one of the more egregious ones I've seen during the postseason play.
Yeah, and you see times where the refs won't even give them the whistle, and they're just there looking dumbfounded, expecting a whistle. And I think it is something that needs to be addressed because it's starting to become a trend, just a habit, and it's bad basketball to see, and obviously the fans aren't enjoying it.
Yep, agree. He's our man, Orlando Torres from San Antonio. If you couldn't tell, wearing the Spurs hat tonight. He is our resident actor, thespian. Man, dude stays busy from San Antonio. But so what do you think tonight, man? Are you ready for this game or what?
Yeah, no, it's actually on already, so I'm keeping up with it a little bit. So it was an early start today.
It was. So we got to get out of here. Big game. This, I know you know what I'm talking about. Do you think it's even worth addressing in the off season, or am I just making way more big a deal about this than it really is?
No, I think it is something that needs to be addressed in off season. Because if not, you're going to start hearing a lot more coaches and other players campaigning about this ban or having something done about it. So I think it is something that will be done, or if not done this off season, in the next off season. This is something that's going to have to be done soon.
Yep. I agree. Dan Schultz, big deal, or am I making too much about it?
No, I mean, I think I'm with you there. I don't put too much of a blame on the players because if the refs are calling it, as a player, you kind of have to take advantage of it. So I think, yeah, you're going to see the rules committee get down in the off season and put some type of augmentation into the rule because, yeah, I mean, it's taken away from the game. I think when you're just constantly putting people on the line, even though James Harden is one of the biggest culprits of it. I feel he especially, but a lot of other players just go in, drive the lane, and specifically look for contact. Don't even attempt to shoot. But if it is the refs that are giving them the calls, you have to put it in the rule book somehow. That's either an offensive foul if you do that, or it's a turnover, a change of possession, something like that to get it out of habit so we don't continually see it every single game.
It's like sometimes I just wish the officials would turn to a player and say, oh, hell no, you wasn't shooting that ball. Don't even give me that crap. Take it out of bounds, side out, because they're clearly not shooting the ball. I mean, these shots are wild off balance and it's not even close. It's coming after the whistle. So and that's what Jeff Van Gundy was talking about in this one particular play. The foul actually occurred coming around a screen. Ball was on the floor. So I understand the continuation, but it's not a natural continuation. It wasn't his basketball move. There was no way in hell he was going to come off that screen and fire a 24-foot shot off balance. It just wasn't going to happen. So why does he get 3 free throws in reward for that? So it's definitely have to be addressed. Another thing, Jeff Van Gundy, and I'm not the biggest Jeff Van Gundy fan. I really don't even like listening to his broadcast, but he brought up a very interesting point on, I think it was the same game I was watching. Someone fouled Draymond Green, I believe, going in for a layup, and they claimed, all ball, man, got all ball. So they showed the replay, and he clearly hacked him on the arm when he didn't even hit hand, much less ball. Clearly hacked him on the arm, but the player was saying, all ball, horrible call. So Jeff Van Gundy's point was, why don't we give these referees challenge flags? If the referee goes to the monitor after a player is claiming that he got all ball, and it was clearly that the player got no ball, hacked him on the arm, boom, ejected from the game. Maybe that would cut down from some of the whining. So that's Dan insane. Obviously thinks that's insane. So
there's so much whining in the NBA. If you're going to do that, you're ejecting every single player out of the team. I mean, the fans are going to pay for tickets and watch 5 minutes of action. I understand your premise because, there is so much whining in the NBA. Chris Paul wouldn't even make it through pregame warmups. So, I mean, I like the idea, but that's so extreme. That's like, I can't even fathom.
Well, I do.
Fruition.
I do think it would slow the game down, and I don't like that. I'm not for anything because some of these replays, I mean, good Lord, we can see it at home in about 17 seconds on the first replay. Why do they need to take 4 or 5 minutes to review these things? I mean, even if they're reviewing time of possession or time on the clock, I can still see it at home in no more than 45 seconds to a minute and a half. Why are they taking 4 or 5 minutes for these things? But let me ask you this, Dan, would it change your mind in any way if the officials were only given like 2 a game? You can't just do it all game long, but if you had like challenge flags, like an NFL coach.
Well, I think that's going to get into tricky water then, because my first thought when you say you only get 2 is what about the other times throughout the game? So you're only going to be punishing certain players. So what's going to happen there? So I think it's a flawed approach. Because there's not going to be a true winner. I mean, trash talk and that type of whining, it's kind of always been around. You always see the players, go at the refs and coaches, and it's part of the game. I don't think you're gonna get out of that.
Do you think it's getting worse though? Do you think it's getting worse? Because Mike Greenberg was talking about this, and he said, "I see it on my son's basketball team. It's trickled way down to the youth now, and that's not a good thing."
Yeah, I don't watch a whole lot of youth basketball, but if it's going down there, that's not a good sign. It's not something that's promising for a person who wants to have a son play basketball. I don't want him doing that. So it's a little scary, but I just don't think there's going to be an easy way to regulate it properly. Maybe just helping out with those. Putting the rules in where you can't do the type of offensive flopping or defensive flopping for that matter. Regulating those type of rules, maybe that'll cut down on the whining a little bit. Who knows? But it's, in a game of fouls, when a human is calling it and there's always that human error element, there's never going to be that 100% winner.
Yep, I agree. It's a little radical. Orlando, what do you think? Is that a little bit of radical measures, or is it just it is what it is? There's always going to be complaining and whining.
Well, no, there's always going to be complaining, but if it's going all the way down to youth, I think that's something that has to be addressed while you're learning the game in the early stages. I know a lot of the blame comes from the guys they see on TV, because those are, a lot of times those are role models for the youth coming up and playing basketball or learning the game, whatever sport it may be. But I think at that point, coaches, parents, whatever, assistants need to step up and kind of something they need to straighten out too, instead of that is a horrible image. But I think that is something at a youth level that could be toned down or taught not to do.
Do you think it's the commissioner's role in any way to kind of step in? Because we've seen the commissioner of basketball in the NBA step in and even apply an official dress code. So, and kind of enhance or, kind of protect the image of the NBA. So you went as far as a dress code. So I don't see I don't think it's unnecessarily unfathomable in the future that Adam Silver may step up and address this, because it's not good. It's not good when you're whining after every single call, and I think that may have a lot to do with why they finally came out with the official reports that are released weekly or bi-weekly or however many times they're released from the NBA officials saying, "Oh, we missed this call, missed that call," which I don't even agree with that, because it's just making your officials look bad. But so is the whining. So between the whining and the offensive shot flopping, I've really been kind of disgusted with some of the things about this playoffs, but these NBA playoffs. But we'll talk more about the NBA playoffs, and I'm off my rant here, and that is the news whip around. We'll talk NBA playoffs officially next. You are listening to and watching My Fantasy Podcast from MyFantasySportsTalk.com. Brandon Reed, Dan Schalk, and Orlando Torres is here. So let's just get right into it. Basically, guys, I don't know what else to say. We've had 2 sweeps, the Warriors and the Cavs. They're ready to meet for the championship. And you got everybody else playing and struggling, trying to get through it. You've got, of course, Orlando Torres' San Antonio Spurs playing right now, Houston Rockets. What's going on, Orlando? What's the score anyway?
It is currently 15-20, pretty tight game going on, so it feels like a must-win for both teams. I know this is something the Rockets would like to steal on the road, because it's going to be hard for the Spurs to battle back in Game 6, and I know the Spurs want to win Game 5 just in case they do drop Game 6 in Houston. At least they have home court advantage to come back into it in Game 7.
Yeah, big game. And the other 2-2 series is, of course, Washington and Boston. Dan, you still holding out hope for your Celtics to go all the way?
I mean, I'll hold out hope. I don't think it's a realistic hope. The Cavs, it's crazy. That switch they said they were going to flip, they flipped. And I mean, they haven't lost in the postseason, so it's kind of hard to say that a Boston team who doesn't really have that second scoring punch opposite Isaiah Thomas to compete with LeBron and Kyrie. I just don't. I don't see it happening. I think they might be able to steal a game or two, put an end to that win streak that the Cavs are on, but I don't see them winning 4. I just don't think it's going to be possible.
Yep. Well, something I just realized, and we'll get into this deeper and deeper as we go, but a week from tonight, guys, is the NBA lottery. So, and you guys realize that the Celtics have the Brooklyn Nets pick, which is supposed to be at least guaranteed top 3 or 4. If the ping pong balls fall the right way, it probably should be the first pick overall. Do you guys realize that, Dan? Do you realize that the Celtics are this good and they're about to get probably the number 1 or 2 pick in the draft?
Yeah, and actually, I've seen a lot of people clamoring for Boston to trade that number 1 pick for one of those supposed superstars that are out there, or somehow do a sign and trade in the offseason with like a Paul George, Jimmy Butler, Gordon Hayward, something like that. I can understand it to a degree, but if you can get like a Markelle Fultz, who's that combo scoring point guard, who can be your franchise player for the next decade, plus, I
Then
wouldn't.
what do you do with Isaiah? Because if you start Markelle at 2 guard, you got a really small backcourt.
Well, I mean, Mark, I think you would use Markelle more on the point and have Isaiah as your 2, kind of coming off, not being that ball carrier or ball guy. So I think that would ultimately be what's best, but I don't think he's going to be a long-term addition to the Celtics. I think they're actually going to move on from him. I know it's been a great story, but for what's best for the franchise, you trade him while his value is high. He's 29 years old. How much longer is he going to give you?
Well, and here's the thing with the teams that are going to be in the lottery. I know we're getting a little bit off topic with some draft coverage here, but while I'm thinking about it, is so many of the top guys coming in this year, and I would say this is a fairly deep draft class. You got a lot of talent coming out in it. Yeah, but a lot of them are point guards. You got Markelle Fultz, natural point guard there. Lonzo Ball. You got De'Aaron Fox. You got Malik Monk, who probably will be better suited playing a point guard. Then you got who's the guy from
Dennis Smith Jr.
Dennis Smith Jr. from NC State. So loaded with point guards. So if you're in need of a point guard, this quite sure the Celtics fit in there. So maybe trading that pick would make sense. I don't know, or unless you go the route Dan said and you get rid of Isaiah Thomas or look to move him. I mean, I don't know. That's going to be a tough decision, but loaded at the point guard position.
Yeah, that's for sure. And just to plug the site on My Fantasy Sports Talk, I did release my first NBA draft profile, and that's of Markelle Fultz, who I'll give you a sneak peek. In every profile I do, I give their draft projection, and I expect him to go first overall. I think he is clearly the best talent and has the greatest ceiling. So my NBA comp to him is a guy playing in tonight's series. I won't give it away, but it's either somebody on the Rockets or Spurs, and it's one of the superstars.
Patrick Beverly.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe. You'll have to read the profile to find out.
All right. Well, let's go back to Orlando. What do you think is going on in the East? Is this going to be a dogfight? Who do you see coming out of the Boston-Washington series? And do either one of them have a chance against Cleveland now that the switch is flipped?
Nah, I think both guys are just playing to – I'm not going to say get swept by Cleveland. Whoever advances, I will give them a game or two. But whichever one of these teams advances is not getting past Cleveland. I just don't think they have the power, the talent to dethrone LeBron at the moment. I'm still going to give the edge to the Celtics, but Washington's playing really good. And the only thing with Washington is their starting five. They gel really well together, but their bench is kind of a mess. And it's, at times that's kind of where you see them kind of mess up the disparity. And if Washington were advanced, I could see them getting a game or two off Cleveland. But then it comes, you can't always depend on John Wall or Bradley Beal or a lot of those guys to play a lot of time, a lot of minutes. And that's where I see it could be a trouble for Washington. And same thing with Boston. They've been pretty good too, but against Cleveland, it's going to be hard to see these guys really, really challenge the Cavs.
Yep. The Cavs are not sweeping either of those teams, though, right, Orlando? Whoever it may be, Boston or Washington, they're not sweeping the Eastern Conference Finals.
No, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but no.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I don't. The switch is flipped, but I think I like Boston, and I really like Washington a little bit more than the previous opponent. So Cleveland made history, the first team to start the playoffs 8-0, sweep the first two series, and then Golden State came back and did the same damn thing. So this is the first time ever in history, may be the first time and last time you ever see this, as your Eastern Conference, well, basically two teams swept the first two rounds, but it just happens to be one in the East and one in the West, and they're probably going to be meeting for the championship. So history made there, and I think that's the way we're heading. I think, I don't know. I don't know. If I had to guess right now, I'm going to say Cleveland series in the East with whoever it be, Boston or Washington, is going to be closer. I'm sorry, Orlando, than that series in the West. And both of you guys are going to disagree with me because Orlando's the San Antonio Spurs guy and Dan is just a Golden State Warriors hater. But I'm saying the Eastern Conference Finals is going to be a closer series than the Western Conference Finals, basically, is what I'm saying. Agree, disagree, thoughts, comments, Dan?
No comment. No,
okay, that's your statement. I get it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think both will probably be pretty even. Like both series will go 5-6 games. Obviously, in the West, it's going to be Golden State losing in 5 or 6. No, I'm just kidding. But really that's what I would like to happen.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, I think they're on a collision course for each other. So ultimately, that's what's going to happen. I think they're both going to dismiss whoever they play fairly easily.
You're out of here. So I agree, man. That's the obvious. That's what it's coming down, obviously. And,
are you kidding? Yeah, that's totally disagree. Whether it's Houston or San Antonio, I'm gonna say Golden State's gonna have their hands tied. They're gonna have a tougher route, I believe, rather than the Cavs. The Cavs, I think, could be sweep either Boston or Washington or either one in a 5-game series, maybe 6. But as far as Golden State, they're not sweeping the Spurs or the Houston, and I'm not even being biased. I'm just being realistic. I could see Houston pushing them to 6-7 game series, regardless of how you feel about Harden and those guys. But when you got like a Lou Williams, Eric Gordon coming off the bench, how many other teams could say that about themselves?
They're deep.
You look
Ryan Anderson shooting the way he's shooting.
Yeah, and one of the things that's I know Golden State's looked pretty good sweeping the Trailblazers and the Jazz, but you look at their starters and their minutes, and I know the postseason, that's what they're built for. There are guys playing long minutes like that. But then you look at the bench of some of the guys, the minutes they're putting in and the numbers they're producing. It's not as great as what Houston's bench is producing or San Antonio's, and I think that's what might cause problems for Houston and having a longer series with either Houston or San Antonio. So I don't see them just completely walking over the Spurs or the Rockets. I think the Cavs will have a much easier route to the finals rather than Golden State. Not saying the Golden State Warriors won't get there. I'm just saying it won't be as easy as some may project.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I guess where I kind of part ways from you there is I believe, yes, I 100% believe that the Spurs-Rockets winner, to me, is probably a little bit tougher than the Celtics or Wizards would present to Golden State. But what I'm saying is Cleveland ain't even on the same level as Golden State. So that's why I don't think it's going to be as tough. Because y'all know how I feel. I think Cleveland is here. Golden State is way up here. Okay, well, pretty far ahead anyway. And then everybody else is way down there. That's the way I feel. But anyway, before we get off this current series, I got a stat for you guys that I know Dan will probably Shrug-Off in Orlando will probably love. Okay, in this series, Houston and San Antonio, when Kawhi Leonard is guarding James Harden is shooting 29% from the field and 10% from three-point range. Questions, comments?
Well, I mean, Kawhi Leonard is one of the best defenders in the NBA. I would like to know Russell Westbrook's stats if Kawhi is guarding him. It's probably 18 turnovers, and he only had 15 possessions.
Why did it go to Westbrook?
Because that's where you were going with it. It all leads back to all you're going to say, June 26th. Hi, June 26th.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's where you're going to find him, June 26th, accepting the MVP award. But that's not where I was going. He's gone, right, Dan? He has nothing to do with these playoffs anymore.
Exactly. Let's keep it that way.
Anyway, what I'm saying is when it comes to big boy basketball, James Harden is not that clutch guy. Someone would find a way. 29%.
Curry on him. It's anybody. It's Kawhi Leonard's greatness there. That's not a knock on anybody he's facing. You could put LeBron on Kawhi, and Kawhi can still shut him down a lot of the times. It's the type of player that Kawhi is. I don't look at that as a negative on the offensive player, and I'm sure Orlando agrees with me.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And again, you're going to see it more in the postseason rather than the regular season. Because I know, there's probably not a lot of people watching Kawhi Leonard currently at the postseason than they are in the regular season. So yeah, that does have to do with a lot of Kawhi and what they ask of him too, because you do see when he's not on Harden and doing other stuff on the offensive side of the ball, you see Harden go off a lot of times.
So, okay, let me reorder things then. So what you guys are telling me there, Russell Westbrook is the MVP, and then actually Kawhi Leonard probably deserves to be second, right? Right? Because he's shutting them down.
Player of the year is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. Number two. Let's move on. All right, let's talk about Rudy Gay, which he's more of an aging player. I'm not sure he's going to make huge splash or get a big contract in free agent. He's a valuable scoring commodity, but the big guy is Kyle Lowry. He's decided to opt out. And who was I guess he's the GM of Toronto guy.
Ujiri.
Yeah, I cannot pronounce his name, but yes, he's wanting to bring back his core three, which I guess is, of course, Lowry, DeRozan, and Ibaka, which Lowry and Ibaka are free agents this coming year, I believe, along with a few other players. So they got some work to do, but with Kyle Lowry opting out early, I'm not sure that he is wanting to stay in Toronto. I think he may have seen enough of this show and he's looking to get out. So that leads me to the big question there. Kyle Lowry's a hell of a point guard. Where does he land? Where's the best landing spot for him? I sent a message out to you, Orlando, because I think that may be exactly what your Spurs need. You need a point guard. Now that Tony Park, same deal. Very close there. Very close to getting superstars. They're both pretty much out of the picture now. And you've had to come to that realization. You really need a franchise point guard back in there again to maybe keep this thing going. Would you be willing, or do you think Kyle Lowry is a pretty good fit for that?
Well, first of all, I knew deep down you were a Tony Romo fan, so there's no need to hide it anymore, Brandon. But
yeah, can't get him out of mind, man. He's everywhere. He's in the broadcast booth. He's on the golf course. I mean, you can't escape him.
Yeah, but it's going to be interesting where he goes. San Antonio would make sense, but I mean, there would be, of course, some stuff that need to happen. I think Paul Gasol would have to outside of his contract or be traded, and of course, Tony Parker would have to retire. I would think. I know Ginobili's leaving as well, so it does make sense Parker retiring because it's kind of hard to see him come back. Even if he does want to come back, he's not playing in the opening season.
Okay, there you go. That's what I was about to say. Even if he does come back, he's got to be at a very limited role.
Yeah, so I don't see him playing the opening season even if he does come back. Even at that, he's 34 years old. So it's going to be hard to see what Parker
is that it? I mean, that's really not that old. I thought he was a little bit older than that, but man, I don't know that he provides too much more for you at this point.
Yeah, and I don't know there's much for him to prove. But I know it's, a lot of times see just players just in general, regardless of the name, just kind of hard to say goodbye to the game. But an injury like that, I'm not gonna say it's career ending, but I mean it was a pretty serious injury. San Antonio would make sense for a guy like Kyle Lowry, and a lot of times, not a lot of times, he's injury prone. He's off and on. I know before the All Star game, he was having a career season. He was putting up some crazy numbers, and there was a lot of talks about Toronto possibly taking the East, and then they kind of collapsed again. But you look at the team, and you say maybe it's not so much a player's fault. You look at the way the coaching, the managing of the team is, and you look at some of the minutes, and you say, well, maybe Lowry's numbers could have minutes could have been limited a little bit better, could have been managed a little bit better, possibly could have helped extended them into the postseason. To maybe they wouldn't have got swept right away. And that's something Coach Pop does favorably. He'll give the players the rest that they need. Um, I'm not sure what other team out in the West Lowry would be a good fit for. A contender. I know he's going to want to go to a contending team. I've heard stuff that Utah could be a possibly fit if George Hill and Gordon Hayward leave. But then again, what good is that? Because you're in the same spot you were in Toronto, or maybe even not even in a good spot compared to having to go to the teams in the West. So it is, and then it's gonna be interesting to see where he goes. Also, Toronto, didn't they just give him a crap load of money? What was it, like over 200 million, 209 million for 5 years? So
I don't remember, but I mean, he was their cornerstone. He was their pillar. So
yeah, and I don't think that deal is not even that old. I don't know if it was the first or second year into that 5 year deal where it's 209 million, or I don't know if it was an extension. So that's a lot of money left to be on the table too. So if he can't go to
12 million a year.
yeah, I don't. It's gonna be hard to say no to that money. I think right now he's riding on a lot of emotions. Ultimately, I think he might come back depending on what happens, or maybe they just might get a new coach out in Toronto. I know they're kind of in rebuild mode, but they're not a bad team. I just think they could have been coached and managed a little bit better, um, and maybe stop trying to overachieve so much. And I think their main thing, their philosophy for the year was they just had a big target on the Cavs' back, and ultimately came around and bit them. Toronto's not a bad team. Watching some of the playoff games or even some of the regular season games, their fans really get behind that team. They love that team. They love those players. They're not a bad team. I just think it could have been coached better and managed a lot better.
And in this at this point though, don't you think we've seen this before in the West, and the West is still currently like this, but the East is getting very difficult to navigate through. I don't know what's going to get you over that hump, because you're not getting over Cleveland right now, and Boston is on the rise. Boston is going to be the next best next team to really threaten Cleveland, and Toronto's probably fading, because even like we talked about Washington, the Wizards are probably even moving into Toronto's territory. So it's going to be tough to navigate through that East. So before we get Dan's opinion on this and on Kyle Lowry, though, I want to add something and get Dan's take on this as well. But first to you, Orlando, you got a lot of point guards now. So I think we agree that you probably need to address point guard. Now, a lot of these guys are unreachable, unattainable, but just some of the free agent point guards that are coming up. Steph Curry's most likely going to re-sign. Golden State's wrapping him up, no doubt there. What I've heard is Chris Paul is probably out of LA. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not, but I've heard that the Clippers are most likely going to blow up because it just isn't working, and it hadn't worked. So we'll see. But Drew Holiday, George Hill, Jeff Teague, even Derrick Rose, Rajon Rondo, Patty Mills. So is there any chance you lose Patty Mills, or what do you think about any of those other guys? Do you think your Spurs will go heavy after one of those big names, Chris Paul or someone like that, George Hill, anybody like that?
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't surprise me George Hill came back. I know he's got San Antonio ties here, but if they go after a guy like Chris Paul, even Kyle Lowry, yeah, I could see someone overpaying Patty Mills and Patty Mills going to another team. They're
especially if he performs well these next few playoff games, whatever he's got left.
Exactly, and I love Patty Mills. I do. A lot of people obviously love him here in the city, but then again, you wonder how he'll do on another team. If a lot of it is actually the play, or just a part of being in the Spurs system and coming off the bench and doing what he does so good. So I could see him parting ways with the team and going to another team, and just throwing money at him, because we see that happen a lot of times. So yeah, if you see him take off from the point guard position, it would make sense for the Spurs to chase after a guy like Chris Paul or Kyle Lowry, and even when the talks of Chris Paul leaving LA, the first two teams to come up were San Antonio and Miami. So that's not very hard to see for next season, especially a guy like Chris Paul who wants to contend. And then now you got a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who he could come and play with. And it depends what happens with LaMarcus Aldridge, but he knows what he has down here and a good coach. And I think Pop will be a guy to be able to handle a guy like Chris Paul. So it's not hard to see. But then again, as a fan, I kind of don't want to see that because I know how Chris Paul could be. And
hey, fourth most efficient player in the playoffs in history.
I get that, but you look at a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge, and I love LaMarcus Aldridge, but you see reports of him having a hard time or just being kind of like a plague in the locker room. Not like a complete plague, but giving reporters a hard time. And it's down here, it's not really the Spurs way, the Spurs culture, and it's kind of odd when you see a guy kind of not participating, in the culture to what they've had for such a long time. So again, I love the style of Chris Paul, but it is kind of worrying me about the guy, how he could be, kind of crying or wanting the ball or running around. Yeah.
Maybe it is Pop that can tell him, quit your damn whining. Maybe Pop is the one that finally can control him because Pop's pretty no nonsense. So we'll see. But Dan, what do you think about the point guard situation? Where's the best landing spot for Kyle Lowry? Is he for sure probably out of Toronto? How's that going to go down? And then all the other point guards that are free agents that I named coming up this all season. There's going to be a lot of point guard shakeup in the NBA this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think the CBA it tries to help teams re-sign their own players. So if Lowry wants the most money, he'll definitely get it in Toronto more than anywhere else. But he says his goal is to chase a ring. What's that?
He opted out early. Do you think that's what he wants to do, or do you think he has already made up in his mind, I probably want out of here?
No, I mean, if he's making $12 million a year on this new CBA, I mean, I think Al Farouk Aminu got a $12 million a year commitment, so he's going to skyrocket in pay. So I mean, I understand the opt out, and he can still re-sign a max, whatever it is, with the Raptors. That's going to be so much more than what he's going to get with any other team.
Well, and that's also, it makes sense because that opens up your negotiating period early. Yeah, I'm opting out. Let's start negotiating. We got a long time.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it definitely can work out in Toronto's favor if they want to re-sign him, which I know they do. But if he wants to go chase a ring, then, yeah, I think the Spurs are the best destination. Other than that, I mean, I don't really see a whole lot. I mean, maybe he can go to the Clippers if they lose Chris Paul. I can see something like that happening. A mystery team that I like, and I kind of give them shout-outs randomly, is just the Milwaukee Bucks. I think you put Lowry with the Greek Freak, Malcolm Brogdon, Greg Monroe, a healthy Jabari Parker coming back. I mean, I think that the Bucks are going to be right up in that upper echelon for the next few years.
And a lot of people didn't even realize that, and I really forgot that they did not, in the playoffs this year. They did not have a healthy Jabari Parker. Big piece of their puzzle missing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's got to show that his ACLs can hold up because they haven't been. So, I mean, if he can stay healthy, I like it. But that team is young and talented. So. While he might not be able to contend to the first 1 or 2 years of that deal, once you get to year 3 or 4, then I think you're probably making the Eastern Conference Finals at least. So it'll remain to be seen. But yeah, I mean, I think this offseason is going to be a little crazy when you have a deep draft. This many. Maybe not always
all the point guard free agents, and then all the hot commodities and the rookie point guards. Wow, want to talk about a rookie shakeup, a point guard shakeup this year? I think the landscapes in the next season are going to look a lot of different as far as who's running the floor.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely going to be crazy, and I think that's going to lead to a lot more trades and different acquisitions going from team to team. You're just going to see, maybe a team wants that young rookie that they drafted, so they're going to do some sign-in trades, which have been rare the last few off seasons. You don't see too many sign-in trades, but I think you're going to get that this year.
Yep, I agree. Going to be crazy, something to look out forward to. And something else to look forward to is going to be our NBA live draft show. So right now, let's move on from free agency and all that and talk a little bit about draft and draft news. And that is a piece that Dan released today. He actually released a couple of pieces today. One of them was the NBA guys leaving college who have not signed agents, so they're leaving that door open. Check out that list. It's on the website right now, myfantasysportstalk.com. But I want to talk about his other list right now because we're going to go ahead and start our NBA draft prep for you by dismissing these guys because they already said they're returning to school. So another hot list. Check it out. We'll go through some of these right now, but check out Dan's articles there on the website myfantasysportstalk.com right now. But of course, just some of the shockers there. Jalen Adams, UConn. Grayson Allen was a big one, Duke, but I agree with that. He probably does need to go back to school. Joel Berry going back to North Carolina. Mikal Bridges, Villanova. Miles Bridges, Michigan State. That was a pretty big one to decide to go back to school. Devontae Graham, Kansas. Just some of these guys. So Alonzo Trier, Arizona, stuck out to me. I loved watching him all year long for Arizona, and that's one of the reasons I predicted Arizona to go pretty far in the tournament. All those guys, big names, they're returning to school. Dan, what motivated you to write this piece, or is there anything that shocked you when you were compiling this list?
Yeah, I mean, the motivation was I want the NBA draft coverage. I mean, we've rocked it with NFL coverage, and I want to be the same way with NBA. So
and this is the first step, right? Get these guys out of the way with. They're going back to school.
Yeah, and I think myfantasysportstalk.com is going to be filled with your NBA draft coverage. Not as heavily covered by a lot of media outlets as the NFL draft is. So I think we're going to be that niche site you're going to want to look to. But yeah, I mean, the first one was Grayson Allen. That kind of surprised me, but I 100% agree of his reason in doing it. Not only his game struggled a little bit last year, but just his image. He hurt his value so much by kicking and tripping everybody. I mean, he's just got to go a season without pushing people down and tripping them.
And I'm not sure exactly how he translates in the NBA. What is he going to be? He could be kind of like a Redick, but I'm not sure he's even as good as he was definitely not as good a shooter as Redick. And so he's kind of in between that point guard, shooting guard NBA frame.
Yeah. I mean, I see him as a Jimmer Fredette, really. Maybe he's
Jimmer Fredette didn't really make it. Of course.
I don't think he's going to have I don't think he's going to have a successful NBA career. I think you're going to see him stick around 4 to 5 years and probably head overseas. But that being said, he's a big name, and I think a lot of people, when you see a Duke star like that, they kind of get name recognition and want to see where he's going to go. Well, he's going to stick around. And then you mentioned Alonzo Trier. Miles Bridges, I think he's going to be the number 1 pick next year now that he's staying in.
And that was great for Tom Izzo that he decided to come back because Tom Izzo kind of had a down year. You get a guy like Miles Bridges coming back, and watch out for Michigan State next year. Guarantee it.
Yep, and then just Joel Berry. That was kind of surprising. I think I understand why he did it. He's a point guard in a very deep class. In his stock, he might be a lottery pick, but he's going to get dropped into the 20s probably because it's so deep with these young freshmen.
We talked about that during tournament time and after the championship game. And I know you yourself for certain, Dan, didn't really see many pros out of that championship game total. And I was kind of right. Joel Berry's borderline. He's a great college player, but I'm not sure he translates to the pros.
Yeah. I mean, he's kind of smallish for his size, but in a weak draft class, which I think next year the 2018 one will be, you can see him kind of rise up. But the reason why I was surprised to see him come back is what else can you accomplish in your college career? You make it to the NCAA tournament finals. Your first year as a freshman, sophomore, you win it. I guess it's just improving your game some more, and it doesn't hurt going to school for free and playing basketball. So you're just not making money doing it that we know of.
Yep. So definitely check out the list on the website right now, myfantasysportstalk.com. We're getting you ready for that June 22nd draft. Who's going to be entering, who's not going to be entering, who's not going to sign with an agent to keep their options open. But that's going to do it for NBA talk for this week. Let's answer NFL mailbag questions next. You are listening to and watching My Fantasy Sports Talk, or My Fantasy Podcast from myfantasysportstalk.com, of course. Brandon Reed, Dan Shaw, Orlando Torres is here. So let's get into our first mailbag question of the day. It's from the NFL variety, and this is going to lead us into NFL free agency talk, but this is a great question to start it out. Comes from T. Davis. What team will be the best fit to sign LeGarrette Blount? I say the Ravens. They lack an established back and could use him. I agree with that, T. Davis. I definitely think the Ravens are an option. Dan, what do you think? LeGarrette Blount, is there any team you got that would really fit really perfectly?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ravens make sense. I like what they have with a Kenneth Dixon, but he's not necessarily a 3-down back. He's more of your receiving back for Joe Flacco. So, yeah, I like LeGarrette Blount with the Ravens, kind of that workhorse on first and second down. Before the NFL draft, I thought the Giants were a possibility, but they grabbed Wayne Gallman in the 4th or 5th round, and I think, you pair him with Paul Perkins. You still have, I think, Rashad Jennings on the team, although he's doing Dancing with the Stars, so who knows how that's going to work out. But, yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to sign Blount for more than the minimum if he takes that. I think he's probably holding out for a little bit more. So the Ravens seem like a good fit. Who knows? He might hold out until there's a training camp injury because, backs kind of go down like flies come training camp. So maybe he'll just wait for an injury to happen and sign with the team that fits him then.
Well, I guess, is there no chance he's coming back for the Patriots, I guess? Maybe that's a dumb question. Is that completely gone? Or, could they not use him?
They have like 17 running backs that are like running backs receivers. It's so weird how they're constructing their team. If you just look at the backs on their roster, they seem like all receiving backs.
Well, then let him play fullback. Use him as your primary fullback if you're not going to really run in a traditional manner.
Right. I mean, I still see a need there for a power back for the Patriots, but I just don't think they're going to have roster spots for him. I mean, you can only have so many running backs on your team, and you sign White to an extension. You sign Gillislee. You still have Deion Lewis. I mean, they just have a ton of backs. I think they've re-signed Brandon Bolden. I mean, it's insane the amount of backs that they have, but they don't fit. They're all similar types, so it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do. But I think they've moved on from him. I don't think he's going to be a Patriot again next season.
Orlando, what say you? What would be the best fit for LeGarrette Blount? How would you kind of fantasy book that if you had to pick where LeGarrette Blount might go and end up and who could use him?
The Ravens would make sense, a team like that, but it wouldn't surprise me. And I know this is kind of far off, but if he returned to a team like Pittsburgh that he played for already, because D'Angelo Williams currently isn't in the roster with them, right? And doesn't Le'Veon Bell have a history with injuries? When the guy's on the field, he's great, but I know he's had some injury history. I don't even think he's played a full season since he's been in the NFL. And, you always got to worry about if he gets into some sort of trouble. Obviously, I think it's getting better with that, but
that's being under Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. That's their way.
Yeah, but to back up a guy like Le'Veon Bell and go back, because if Bell were to go back, who's their next backup? I don't even think I could name him because I don't think D'Angelo Williams there anymore. So something like
is D'Angelo not on their roster anymore, Dan?
I'm not too sure, but I know Blount used to back up Bell. Didn't they get arrested smoking weed in the car? I think he may have burned bridges. I think he may have burned that Pittsburgh Steelers bridge. I don't know if they're going to welcome him back there.
Yeah, no, you are correct. Yeah, you're correct.
You must ride public buses. That's how they transport. No cars for you. I don't know, man. I'm not really sure. That kind of disappoints me because I guess I'm not keeping up with D'Angelo Williams. I didn't know that he was not still Le'Veon Bell's backup, and unless he's a free agent or something I'm not aware of. So sorry, I don't know that, but I'm not going to disagree with you there because he provides a different role than both of those guys provide. And that's what I was saying, kind of like the fullback role with New England if he was there, because everyone needs that Anthony Tolliver. Is Anthony Tolliver or Michael Tolliver, whoever the Panthers fullback was that came in? He would always get more fantasy production out of like 3 or 4 snaps than the primary running back would.
Kind of like John Kuhn when he was in Green Bay.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, I don't know. 2 of the Ravens make sense, yes. I'm not disagreeing with what either one of you guys said either. But the 2 teams that I picked out when I started thinking about this is, number one, who really sucks at running the ball? Well, the Giants come to mind that have no freaking running game at all. So they would get too one-dimensional in that red zone. I actually would see them throw 3 ISO corner lob passes to ODB 3 times in a row in red zone situations. And they didn't even try to run the ball, but probably for a good reason. They'd had no running game. Paul Perkins, Shane Vereen, Sean Drone. I mean, that is currently their running back staff. So, yeah, add you a LeGarrette Blount, I think you would be okay or be a lot better. Use him in red zone situations and just to pound it. I mean, he was doing good in the Super Bowl. So, and then the number 2 team, I think, is really struggling figuring out the running game, and I think it's probably to their detriment right now because they got pretty much everything else going on for them, is the Detroit Lions. Again, they have no running game to speak of. They were asking Matt Stafford to do way too much last year. I looked at the numbers. They had 6 TDs total from all of their backfield combined, all of their running backs. So, and actually, Amir Abdullah, who was probably their number 1 running back, I guess you can make the case, Theo Riddick, whoever, but I kind of consider Amir Abdullah their number 1 back. He had 0 of those touchdowns. So, you got a mess there. Abdullah, Riddick, Zach Zenner, Dwayne Washington, they need some red zone help as well. So, one of those 2 teams is who I'd be calling for LeGarrette Blount pretty quickly if I'm the Giants or the Lions. So, but thanks for the question, T. Davis. That's a good one to kick off our who is left in free agency conversation, because that's a list I want to bring up now. Who do you think is the best free agents left currently in the NFL, Dan? Who's out there that probably needs to be picked up pretty soon?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest name is Colin Kaepernick. I mean, everybody's kind of talking about him and, when is he going to get signed? I mean, they're going beyond quarterback, because I think, most of the teams have their quarterback set, or at least their quarterback competition set. But a guy that played with the Titans last year, Jason McCourty, I believe he's still out there. And
he's at the top of the list. Yeah, he's 30 years old, and at the top of the list I pulled up of probably best prospects left.
Yeah, so I mean, he's a guy that I think can immediately fill a hole in a secondary. I'm kind of surprised that he's still out there. Another big name who kind of had a bad season is Darrelle Revis. He's not signed anywhere either, so that's a little surprising. So those are 2 big secondary names, that are available. A guy that recently visited the Bills is a safety, Trey Boston. I know Bills fans are pretty high on him. He was a backup safety in Carolina, but he's getting a lot of traction around here, which is kind of shocking. I mean, he's a backup safety, but I know the Bills fans are clamoring for him, and the Bills just hired the assistant GM of the Panthers, Brandon Beane, so the Carolina ties can continue to come to Buffalo.
I'm glad you mentioned Kaepernick, because I really didn't even think about him when looking at this list. He's almost like a separate category right now to me, and I'm kind of in the minority in a lot of this, because we've talked about this on the podcast before, is that he does have a certain skill set, and if your team makeup doesn't really provide the best fit for that team makeup, then you're probably not going to touch him. But I honestly think it's something more going on than that. If he's totally being blackballed, here's something I thought about the other day. Do these guys remember Riley Cooper? If you're telling me what Colin Kaepernick did deserves more blackballing than what Riley Cooper did, then you're insane and you deserve to lose. So I just think Colin Kaepernick has a place somewhere in the NFL. Orlando?
Yeah, no, Kaepernick as well. I think last year when he did play, he improved a little, but I know a lot of teams kind of don't want to touch him with whatever's going on, and which I think is kind of wrong. He's standing by his word and stuff, but that's a whole another discussion. I'm looking at one of the free agents, and this is going a little bit different than Darrelle Revis and even Victor Cruz, guys like that, had kind of injury problems or kind of getting up there in age. But one guy that kind of stands out to me is just the guy who just recently got cut by the Browns a couple weeks ago, and that's Gary Barnidge. I think you put him on a solid team that could run a 2 tight end set, or that needs just a big old tight end to depend on. I think he could go and make an impact on an offense.
The Patriots, they lost Martellus Bennett.
Yeah, and I know they just picked up Dwayne Allen, but yeah.
That's right. Yeah, they replaced Martellus Bennett with Dwayne Allen, so they're doing pretty good. But hey, Rob Gronkowski, I would bet him not playing on 9+ games this year.
Yeah, I mean, but how silly will the Browns feel? Just releasing Barnes like that and seeing him to go another team and have some pretty good success, which I think it's a good possibility because Gary Barnes is a pretty good player. Unfortunately, he was always going through quarterbacks and quarterback changes. It wasn't even funny for him. So he probably got out of a messy situation that he wanted to begin with. So Gary Barnage is a free agent that I'm interested in seeing where he lands and seeing how he'll fit into a team or two tight end set or just going in there and helping out another quarterback.
Yep, that was one of the guys on my list. So you guys have kind of hit it. So some of the guys we hadn't talked about that are at the top of that list there: Tremaine Brock, King Dunlap, Ryan Clady, Michael Floyd, Nick Mangold. Nick Mangold's getting on up there, but and then Brandon Flowers, Elvis Doomerville. Just Altron Werner, just some of the guys, Sam Shield. So there's still some talent out there that will be picked up fairly soon. But that's pretty much what we're going to be doing going forward the next few weeks on my fantasy podcast, is talking about NFL free agents, because these teams are being made up right now. And now that the draft is over, still a few free agents looming. We're going to be getting into training camps really soon, so we're going to find out how these teams are being made up. And still a lot of talent out there. Just the names we just read out, that's still a lot of impact-making talent that is still out there in the NFL that could make a difference. But what we're going to do for you right now is start NFL fantasy coverage early, because that's a big part of our niche here. It's my fantasy sports talk, okay? My fantasy podcast. So we're going to talk fantasy, and NFL fantasy is probably the biggest fantasy sport in the world, although Dan may make an argument for baseball. I don't know, but fantasy football is huge. That's when it all took off. So what we're going to do for you today, I know it's way, way, way too early to probably even do this, but it's so much fun. So what we're going to do is we're going to give our mock draft, our mock fantasy drafts of the top 10 players taken when you start doing your fantasy drafts. I know some of you guys probably talked about this. We talked a month ago about insanely early. Is there any leagues drafting this early? Man, how early, seriously, is the earliest you could do a draft?
Well, I mean, I had mentioned last time I did one in February last year, so that was a dynasty league. But yeah, I mean,
league is more like it.
Yeah, for a one year league, I mean, you can't do it before they even go through full OTAs, even most of training camps. So I mean,
maybe I want to pick Gary Barnage. I don't even know who the hell he's playing for, and I think he could be an impact player.
Right. So I mean, I think you'll see some diehards start to do it in July, but I think it'll really pick up in August, and then obviously towards the end of August is when most people draft.
So we'll go through it real quick. We're just going to go through our top 10. And we'll each go through it. We'll get Ryan Thomas in here in just a second, too, and bring him into this conversation. Let me pull up my list here. And I can tell you right now, the back end of my list is going to shock and probably piss Dan off. And he's probably going to tell me I'm a freaking idiot. And it's probably because it started getting hard around pick 7 or 8. So the last couple of picks, I did it just for Dan. But I'll start it out here. Here is my top 10. And in case you're new to the podcast, I won the championship last year. I like to bring it up every time I can. But anyway, I beat Dan Chalk. He's on this podcast too. So you choose who to listen to here. But Ryan Thomas, we'll bring him in, but he actually kind of flip-flopped me. He did his Thomas Take podcast over the weekend, and I suggested to him that as a debate question that Ezekiel Elliott was probably the safest pick. Orlando may agree with that. I don't know, but he kind of flip-flopped me, and you guys may agree with that, but he kind of flip-flopped me to David Johnson, and I kind of agree because of the pass-catching ability out of the backfield, and I do agree with that. The reason I thought Ezekiel Elliott would be the safest pick because I know he's going to get the workload. And I'm sorry, Dan, that's why I don't have Dez Bryant. I'll tell you off the top, that's why I don't have Dez Bryant in the top 10, because even though I hate to say it, I know it, but Dak Prescott is not your traditional thrower of the ball like Tony Romo was. So I think that slides Dez's productivity down a little bit and probably picks Ezekiel's up. But either way, with that offensive line, I know they're running the ball. But most dynamic player probably is David Johnson. I think you're going to see him go first in a lot of the drafts. So, but then, of course, number 2 that I will take Ezekiel Elliott. Number 3, Le'Veon Bell. I'm sticking with that heavy running back theme this year. And last year I had the number 1 pick in the draft and went with Odell Beckham Jr. That pretty much bit me through most of the season until the very end. And that's just me. I kind of like receivers. I'm not even opposed to taking a quarterback, but I think this is definitely a year where you need to take these running backs, these stud running backs. So Le'Veon Bell is my 3rd pick. Then I get into the receivers. I personally think A.J. Green is going to have one of the better years and more impactful years if he stays healthy from a fantasy production. What the dude does is just insane, from catching Hail Marys to whatever. So he's my 4th pick. 5th, I'm going with another receiver. Keep that going. I think Julio Jones will have a better season than Odell Beckham Jr., who I have at 6. So that's the way I slid them. Mike Evans is number 7, staying with the wide receiver theme. I think Mike Evans is only going to have a better season as Jameis Winston only gets better. And Mike Evans is just a super stud, super athlete. So I'm going with Mike Evans to break the top 10 and 7. And then I got to go. I've been disrespecting this guy for so long, and he's in the top 5 of so many, top 4, 3 really, in so many mock drafts, Antonio Brown. So I'll go with Antonio Brown, number 8. Then I'm throwing my 2 guys in there for Dan. My 9th and 10th, which Dan may not disagree with number 10, but he'll probably shoot me for saying number 9, but he'll probably shoot me for saying number 10. My number 9 pick would be DeMarco Murray. I think I know he's getting older, but he's going to have an impact for the Titans. They saw what they could do last year. He had a great season last year, and I think he needs to be a significant part of the Titans offense this year. And then, of course, number 10, LaShawn McCoy of the Buffalo Bills. Because what else do they got going on? What the hell else do the Buffalo Bills got going on? The number 1 rushing thing from last year. If LaShawn McCoy stays healthy, I think he's a big piece. Dan, let me go to you next, because I know you probably respond to my top 10 and then give your top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with most of it. McCoy, he's on the wrong side of 30 now. He has more carries than anybody else in the NFL in the last few years. So I think he's an injury waiting to happen, probably with everybody else that's listed on Orlando's list or anybody listed on the Spurs roster. So, he's getting old. I wouldn't count on him. Pick their backups up. There's no good ones, but you can pick those guys up too. I'll just give you my list. I agree with you, David Johnson, first overall. I have had a man crush on him since I scouted him coming into the NFL draft when I had him as my number 1 running back. So I love him. I have my boy Ezekiel Elliott 2nd, Dallas Cowboys. Then I'm going to go wide receiver with Julio Jones. I think you saw what he did last year in the playoffs. He's a dominant force. Anytime you have a potential receiver to go for over 300 yards in one game, he's going to be my number 1 receiver. 4, I'm going another receiver, Mike Evans. I think he's going to have a fantastic season with Jameis Winston. Will not be double covered with all the weapons that they have on offense with the Deshaun Jackson and the other signings that they had, like drafting O.J. Howard, different things like that.
Should be the best year Mike Evans has had.
Yeah, without a doubt. 5, I'm going to go back to Odell Beckham. I still think, he's a weapon to have, and especially if you have those, if you're in those leagues where, long touchdowns count for bonus points, that's only going to add to his value.
He's a freak.
6,
he's still a freak.
Yeah, without a doubt. And they added even more weapons in the offseason, so the Giants' passing game is going to be lethal. Maybe this is the year Manning gets that number 1.
Well, then maybe finally Ben McAdoo finally figures it out, because I think he was most of the blame for their non-success this year. I really do. I think if Tom Coughlin was still the coach of that team, they would have had a lot more success than they did.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. My 6th spot, I'm giving to A.J. Green. Like you said, I like the John Ross selection just so you have another vertical threat, so the safety won't always be shading towards A.J. Green's side. So I like that. 7, I'm going Jordan Howard from the Chicago Bears. He was the number 3 fantasy running back last year. I expect him to be the number 3 fantasy running back this year. 8, I'll give you Le'Veon Bell. I hate him. I would never draft him personally.
Wow.
He's going to either get suspended or hurt. It's bound to happen. He's never had a full season, so expect to at least lose him for a couple games. If you
off the team, it'll be fun.
What?
keep LeGarrette Blount off the team, and he'll be fine.
Well,
Orlando's got him sitting in college.
Yeah, not if Orlando's the GM. Number 9, Michael Thomas, wide receiver from the Saints. He's their number 1 guy. Drew Brees loved him as a rookie. He led all rookies in receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, whatever. He's the guy. He's going to be a beast. He's going to put up better numbers than Brandon Cooks puts up in New England. That's without a doubt. And number 10, Todd Gurley. He's the Rams have upgraded their offensive line. You have another year with Goff. I don't think Goff is the answer, but they're going to be running the ball a lot. And he's going to be doing screen passes and jump, check downs nonstop to Gurley. So I like to see Todd have a bounce back year.
Yeah, I think if anything, Goff has shown that he probably doesn't need to be throwing the ball very much. And if they improve that offensive line, then Gurley probably has a bounce back year. So I like it. Dan. We were pretty much in the same realm there, but you didn't have DeMarco Murray or LaShawn McCoy in your top 10, and you slid Le'Veon Bell way down. So what you slid Jordan Howard in there though, and Michael Thomas, which they're higher on the list, and that probably makes more sense than what I did. My 9th and 10th pick were probably just to rib you a little bit, but not really. I don't know. We'll see. With Michael Thomas, I kind of agree. But anyway, Orlando, what do you think, man? You need a bounce back year, so this better be a hell of a top 10 list, man.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you're plotting. So, what's the scheme? What's the plan here for this plot?
What better way to start out with drafting a GOAT, Danny Woodhead at number 1?
Okay, he's done. Is Ryan? Where's Ryan? We're done with him. Seriously.
Honestly, for the first 3 picks, I think you could honestly flip-flop Bell, Johnson, or Ezekiel Elliott, depending on what your standpoint is. I would take David Johnson over 1, but I could see a valid argument made for each one of those 3 backs, just depending on what you want and what you need. Of course, if you're worried about the injuries, I could see why, or trouble, I could see why you would avoid Bell. And David Johnson or Ezekiel Elliott might be the safest picks, but either one of those 3 guys wouldn't be bad. So I will start out with David Johnson, Zeke 2, Bell 3, and then I would take Mike Evans at 4. I'm going to put him. I think he's going to have a big year, and I'm going to go and make a big prediction right now. I think the Bucs are taking the NFC South. That's just my opinion, but I think the Bucs are in for a huge season. So I will go ahead and take Mike Evans at 4. At 5, it's going to have to end sometime, but I think I will still stick with a guy like Antonio Brown. He's just one of those talents. And I know you still got Odell and you got Julio Jones, but from what I've seen from Antonio Brown consecutively, the way he does it, and he's been able to stay healthy on the field, I would take Brown at 5 as the second wideout. 6, I'm going to take Odell, and it's not a knock against Julio. Julio's the type of guy that'll give you those 30-point games. We saw him last year put up a 50-point game, depending if you're in PPR league or not. But then he just has those 2-3 games where he's lingering, where you're not going to see him on your starting lineup for a while. That's what concerns me about Julio Jones. So I would take Julio at 7 after that, and at 8 I'm with Dan right here. I'm pretty high on Jordan Howard. I know we had him, I think, a little bit higher, but I'm really high on Jordan Howard as well. So I would take Jordan Howard.
Which I'm surprised you didn't take him even higher, because I knew you were pretty high on him.
Yeah, well, and again, it just depends on what your philosophy is, or if you want to draft, if you want it back, or if you're drafting at if you're drafting at the first round, at the end of the first round, I typically go with the wide receiver and come back around and grab a running back. It depends on what your style is. 9 might actually surprise you, but I'm going to stick with another running back, and that's Devonta Freeman. I know it's a bit of a shocker, but last year I was a doubter. I doubted him. I didn't, I said, the first time he did this, teams weren't ready for it. Teams weren't scheming for him, but he proved me wrong. And he was able to stay consistent. And so I will take Devonta Freeman at the end of the first round, or if he fell to me early in the second round, I will gladly take Devonta Freeman. And the 10th pick, I'm going to go ahead and stick with Michael Thomas. I think he's going to be huge. Second year there with Drew Brees, and they like to pass a lot. They're pass heavy. And I know they got Mark Ingram and Adrian Peterson there, but that still doesn't scare me from taking a guy like Michael Thomas at the end of the first round.
Yep, good selections there. And Yeah, I think the consensus is that Michael Thomas will be up there, fairly high. I don't know. I've kind of bought into this last year that the Saints are eventually going to be slipping, and I think they will continue to slip. So, but that doesn't mean that Drew Brees still can't get it done. So, but we'll see. But guys, that's our fantasy mock top 10 for you real early. It'll probably change slightly, but that's pretty much probably it. Out of combined of what myself, Dan, and Orlando just gave you right there, that's probably going to be close to your top 10 in most fantasy drafts coming up, no matter when you draft, whether it may be in February and it's already over, or you're going to wait till about the last week before the season starts, like I prefer to do, so you know who's where and all that. So, but much more NFL fantasy talk to come, much more NFL free agency talk to come. So we're going to kind of bookmark the NFL right there for this week. Move on next and talk about boxing. Boxing? That's right. Next. You're listening to and watching My Fantasy Podcast from MyFantasySportsTalk.com. Brandon Reed, Dan Schalk, and Orlando Torres is here. We're going to try to bring in Ryan Thomas. You heard any word from Ryan Thomas, Dan?
Yeah, we've been attempting to connect for the last minute or two, so I expect to see him shortly. But as we know on draft night, Ryan Thomas and punctuality don't always mix.
Well, I just got a call from him right now privately, so I think he down the run. He
must be good at that stuff. So. Yeah, I don't even know. That's lovely technology, and it's kind of surprising too, because Ryan's side job is electronics and selling technology, but yet he can't figure it out himself. So I hope he's listening.
Yeah, at least listen to us. So we're gonna go on with the podcast, and you can pick up anytime you can figure out the clicks and navigate through to us. But we are moving on to boxing, and I want your take, Ryan Thomas. So jump in here whenever you can, man. But I want to go to Orlando first here, because I know you were keeping up with the Canelo Alvarez Chavez Jr. fight on Saturday. I know you probably kept up with the Anthony Joshua and Vladimir Klitschko fight the week before that. So we've had 2 weeks of really good boxing matches, although Saturday, we talked about this, on the message boards, Orlando, that Saturday really didn't live up to hype. That was a very boring fight that I'd be absolutely pissed off about if I paid $70 to see that crap.
Yeah, no, it was horrible. I seen it described as a glorified sparring session. I think that was one of the many headlines that I saw. And a lot of times you just see kind of like a big name and people are going to buy it. And especially in this case, from where they're from, Chavez's dad, of course. I grew up watching a lot of Mike Tyson and Chavez Sr., of course, because that was the first combat sport I was introduced to, was boxing.
Well, and then even if you liked Alvarez and were rooting for Alvarez, it just wasn't even a good fight.
No, it wasn't a good fight, and he even said he held back. He said, he kind of toyed with them, but he wasn't going to knock him out. And I think that's I don't know if that's just some respect he had or some respect he has for his dad, or I don't know. But
Chavez acted like he wasn't even trying. He seriously acted like he didn't want to be there, and he wasn't even trying to win.
Yeah,
even in the later rounds.
Yeah, it was horrible. After a while, I watched the fight, but it wasn't nothing what I expected. A lot, and you see that a lot. I don't even know why I'm blindsided by this. You always see kind of these hype fights, but I did expect it a good fight.
Mayweather, Pacquiao. I mean, my lord, if you paid $100 for that, you were one pissed off hombre.
Well, not so much that. A lot of previous Canelo fights, a lot of his fights were ending in knockouts. I mean, this guy's an animal. And I don't know if you've seen a couple of his fights. This guy's a straight killer in the ring. He'll go out there and he's a brawler. And that's one thing, they said about Canelo. Like, a lot of times when he steps in the ring, someone's going to get knocked out. It's either going to be Canelo or his opponent. And a lot of times it's the guy standing in front of Canelo, because he's a pretty good boxer and he loves to go out there and swing. So I even predicted in a piece that I wrote that he was going to knock out Chavez in the 8th or 9th round, because it's exactly what I predicted. This guy's always looking, picking his shots, tiring a guy out, and he goes for the knockout at the end. And that's not what we saw. But looking forward to the big fight in September with Triple G. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna go ahead and pay for that fight because I think that's a fight that's really going to live up to the hype. I know that sounds kind of cliche from what we've seen, but I think that's a fight that boxing needs.
I hope so. I thought the Mayweather Pacquiao fight was the fight that boxing needs, but I mean, it was like 6 to 8 years too late. So
Yeah, well, that was a little bit older, and at least with these guys, they're still they're still in their prime. Canelo's not that old, and same thing with Gennady Golovkin, and I think that's one thing that kind of um, the UFC did so well, Dana White and those guys, or just MMA in general, because he always makes sure that the best fight the best. And I think that's why you've seen so many people draw their attention towards UFC or the MMA compared to boxing, where you don't always see the best fighting the best. And I think that's kind of what killed the sport. And this is probably the closest thing to the mega fight that boxing has had. Well, yeah, since Pacquiao and Mayweather, but at least with two guys in their prime.
yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think I'll be honest with you, I don't keep up with MMA as much as you guys do, and a lot of the world does. I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy good pay-per-views, and the action. Let's face it, the action is always there, and that's why I think MMA has taken over the reins from boxing, is because you're going to see action no matter what. I don't care what the matchup is, how good the matchup is, or what your feelings about the fighters are. You're going to see action. You're either going to see a knockout or a grapple or something. You know, it's more action-packed than what we saw this past Saturday night. And I think I just have to believe that the rise of UFC and MMA has kind of killed boxing some. But there's some still traditional boxers out there that they're still growing up in boxing, and it's not like it used to be. I'm just coming from the old school, and you mentioned growing up watching Mike Tyson and seeing some of the more old school boxers. And of course you probably remember some of these guys and see highlights. I mean, back in the day, it was the 80s. Guys like Julio Cesar Chavez, Senior, Roberto Duran, Thomas Hearns, Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, then of course Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield in the late 80s, and then in the 90s you have those guys, Holyfield, Tyson, along with Riddick Bowe. I mean, Evander Holyfield and Riddick Bowe had some epic fights. Of course, everyone remembers when the guy parachuted into the ring, and Riddick and Bowe Holyfield too. Of course, but some of these other guys you probably forgot about, like Roy Jones Jr. Roy Jones Jr. was a killer in the 90s. That's one of the most awesome fighters I've ever seen. Oscar De La Hoya, Pernell Whitaker, Bernard Hopkins, all these guys in the 90s, and you just don't have that anymore. You just don't have that depth of awesomeness where you can see really great fights at least twice a year. You just don't have it now.
Yeah, you don't, and you miss kind of seeing like those presents, even like a Shane Mosley. He fought into the guy who fought into he was like 50 years old. Yeah, you just don't see
Bernard
those.
Hopkins and
Yeah, and you don't see that.
Ago.
I think with Anthony Joshua, I know you brought up that fight, and I think he's one of the.
That kind of reminded me of how old school boxing was, but it's heavyweights. I always enjoyed the heavyweights more, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
boxing was deeper, but the heavyweights provided something else for you, and that Joshua Klitschko fight kind of reminded me of a little bit more of old school boxing. It was pretty entertaining.
It was an entertaining fight, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't keep up with that fight compared to a lot of people that bought the fight on Saturday. But I mean, Joshua's probably the next biggest boxing star coming up, and he's 19-0 and with 19 knockouts. I mean, this guy's he's an animal. So I think he's one of the guys you need to put on the radar. But yeah, I love boxing, but boxing is on a decline. It's been on decline for a long while. So
because of the MMA, do you think? I mean, is that the direct cause of it?
Direct cause, not so much a direct cause. I think it is part of it, but what's stopping boxing from putting up mega fights or having to fight the best?
I agree. Why isn't there that depth of talent like there used to be? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So I remember even seeing some documentary on ESPN. It was like 2-3 years ago, where it was MMA, WWE and then boxing. As you know, we're both wrestling fans, but we know it's predetermined. But that had even surpassed boxing for a good while.
Yeah.
So that should say a lot about boxing.
I think there's a point where tennis even surpassed boxing, which it may even be now. And to me, I think tennis is pretty low right now, because even tennis is not the same as it used to be in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. No, so I would love to hear Ryan's take on this too, but I'm really expecting a huge fight in September. I really whether I go out and see it or pay for it, I really think this is going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be one of those old school slugfest kind of fights, because ultimately there's going to be a lot of money involved. But I think these guys have really wanted to have this for a while, and they kind of have been at it back and forth.
Well, here's the thing I don't quite understand about this Golovkin-Alvarez fight, Orlando, is so Alvarez is 49-1-1, so that's 51 fights, and he's only 26 years old, whereas Gennady Golovkin is 37-0, hadn't been defeated. Yes, that's true, but he's 35 years old, and I tried to look at his resume, and you talked about the impressive style and the impressive knockouts, but I looked at his resume, and I don't see where the big-time wins are. I mean, he beat Kell Brook. I know Kell Brook. He beat Marco Rubio, not the Florida senator, but he did beat Marco Rubio. His resume of wins was just not as impressive as the guys that I saw that Canelo Alvarez fought. Canelo's only loss was to Mayweather. He has one draw on his resume, but that was way back in his 5th professional fight period. But he's beat Chavez Jr., of course, Amir Khan, Miguel Cotto twice, James Kirkland, Shane Mosley. Although Shane Mosley was getting older, but to me, Alvarez's resume is just a little bit more impressive than Gennady Golovkin, despite being 37-0, but he's 35 years old.
Yeah, and I think with Golovkin, I understand that that resume, but he just goes out there and people love to see this guy. Even some of his free fights that I see on Showtime. When you tune into Golovkin fights, kind of same thing with Alvarez. Someone's going to get knocked out, and I think that's what people love. It's just that kind of old school style of boxing. This guy goes in there, whether he's knocking you out with a body shot or just straight up dropping you from your jaw. And his last fight though with Jacobs, that I know that raised a lot of questions. A lot of people felt that Jacobs possibly could have won that fight, but his resume. I just think towards his style, the way he fights, it's exciting, and I think that's what people want to see. I think that's what they expect in the same round as same fight coming up as well. And Alvarez too. His only loss was to Mayweather, but I think if he was at this point in his career a couple years ago when he would have fought Mayweather, it could have been a different fight. And obviously Mayweather was going to jump on that fight because that is a big paycheck at that time.
Right. So I'm going to fall for it again, man. I'm going to say that this is going to be the biggest fight boxing has seen in many, many years, and I'll probably be let down again. But we had a kind of a side conversation as, you were saying you're probably going to – you would probably pay for it again. I would probably find alternative ways to watch it. But it's sad to me. It's sad that boxing has fallen this far. And again – no disrespect to these guys, because throughout the years, middleweights, light heavyweights, all these guys have been integral in boxing. But it seems to me like heavyweights have to carry that torch, and that's not even there. And we've talked about the last 2 biggest fights in probably the last 15 years have been Mayweather Pacquiao and now possibly Alvarez and Golovkin. Something's wrong with that to me. So. We'll see. But that's our boxing talk, man. I'm sorry, Ryan. I don't know where you are, man. I know he had some dental work going on, and he said he was feeling a little numb or something, but I didn't know that was his fingers where he can't press links to join us.
This guy having some technical difficulties, I guess. He's trying. It's actually quite amusing to watch him vent his frustration to me in a chat. It's quite amusing. So I was getting a kick out of his responses while you guys were talking. I don't think we're gonna get him on. Is ultimately what's gonna happen. He is technology challenged at the moment.
Well, that's okay. We'll get his take on it a little bit later in other podcasts, and maybe do a separate topic on this, and beef it out, with myself, Ryan Thomas, and Orlando, and do a little boxing segment in the future. But we're gonna move on because we got fantasy baseball mailbag questions to answer. So let's get into that before we wrap this whole thing up. The first one comes from Gary Friedman. Are the Yankees for real? As a Yankees fan, I'm optimistic, but I wasn't expecting this start. Dan, you keep up with baseball real heavily, particularly the AL. So are the Yankees for real?
While I would like to say their start is definitely promising, I didn't expect it to happen either, so I'm with you there. I don't think it is, and I'll tell you why. There's a couple things. Their offense is hitting the ball lights out right now. I mean, you look at some of their players who are crushing the ball. Obviously, you have Aaron Judge, the 7-foot tall monster who can crush home runs by swinging his pinky. So, he's a beast. I don't think he's going to keep up the pace that he's on right now, although I do expect him to continue to be a solid player and end up having a solid career, but I don't think he's going to be able to keep it going.
You look at their 13 home runs in like less than 30 games, something like that.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's unbelievable. I didn't expect that start. But here's the thing: their next best hitter is Aaron Hicks, a guy that they got secondhand from the Twins a couple years ago. He's hitting 350 or something right now. It's insane. He's a career, before coming into this year, he was a career 222 hitter. So I don't expect him to keep up that pace. And that's what's doing it. Their pitching has been decent, but it hasn't been that great. Your ace Masahiro Tanaka has a 4.36 ERA, and he's still been able to get 5 wins during that time. And it's because of the run support that the Yankees are being able to give them. So I don't think their offense is going to be sustain that amount of runs game in, game out. So you're going to see them start to fall back a little bit. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think you're going to see them be good right up until they're on the All-Star break, and then they're going to start to kind of hit their wall. The young players, as they usually do, hit a rookie or sophomore slump towards the end of the year because they're not used to playing 162 games. So I think their start's promising, and I expect them to be decent, have 85 wins at most, but I think it's going to fall just short of a wild card berth.
Wow. Okay. I hint a little bit of Yankee hatred in there, though.
I no, not at all. I grew up a Yankees fan. Before I was an Astros fan, I was a Yankees fan. There's really, it's just
you don't think they're going to make the playoffs?
No, I don't think they will. Just because baseball, you don't have a lot of teams making the playoffs. So you have your division winners.
And that's been my biggest gripe with baseball over the years. Is my lord, you play 162 games, and what is it, like 6% of the league makes the playoffs? yeah.
I mean, that's it. I like give them a couple years. They're just too young. I mean, you have to look at who they're relying on pitching wise. Their best pitchers right now is Jordan Montgomery, a rookie who's never done it before. Luis Severino, who had I think over a 10 ERA last year. I mean, he was bad. So he's getting it together now.
Sabathia is not really doing great. Montgomery, you mentioned, I think, is 4th in the rotation, so he's really stepping it up.
Yeah, so they have their back end of their rotation is what's keeping them afloat, and Sabathia is getting lit up right now by the Reds. So he has over a 5 or 6 ERA. So their frontline guys are the ones. I think
he's a free agent in our fantasy league, Dan. I don't think he's even drafted in our fantasy league or even taken, because I was looking at him the other day. I think he's available.
Yeah, he definitely is, and it's a good thing that he's on the waiver wire because he gives up runs like he eats donuts. So, I think it's nice for the Yankees, but they're a year too early. I've witnessed this before with the Astros. They brought up all their talent, had a really good push one year, but weren't able to get there, and then the next year they did get there. So. I like what the Yankees are doing. They're doing a rebuild that they've never been able to do before. It's always been Steinbrenner just buying his free agents. They're building through their farm system, and now you're reaping the rewards and benefits of that. So I like what they're doing. I don't see it sustained. There's always 1 or 2 teams every year for the first 2-3 months of the year go out guns blazing, and then they start to fall off.
I completely understand your point, and I even agree with it because we're so early in the season and it's baseball. There's 162 games to be played, but right now I'm saying the Yankees are 21-9, best record in the majors. They're second in runs scored in the majors. They are third in runs given up in the majors. They have Starlin Castro, leading in batting average. Aaron Judge is killing it right now. Like you said, 7 feet tall, officially 6'7", but he's a freaking monster and he's crushing the ball. And he's only 26 years old, second year in the league. So he's a promising player. And then, of course, Jacoby Ellsbury and Matt Holliday, the Cardinals let go, but all four of those guys are hitting like 280 or better, and they're in the top 20 in hitting, all those guys. So I think the run production will continue to be there, but I agree with you about the pitching rotation a little bit because Sabathia, I think, is third and not doing good at all. And then Pineda, and then who is their top guy? Who's the top guy in that rotation?
Naka.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I mean, they're just kind of keeping it afloat while Sabathia sucks. And you mentioned Montgomery's really kind of stepping up. So that concerns me a little bit. I think that will fall off, but I don't think their run production will fall off. So 21-9, you start 21-9. I understand what Dan is saying, but I'm going to say, yeah, they're for real. Yeah, they got a chance. So we'll see what happens. But appreciate the question, Gary Friedman. Always like talking Yankees. Everyone likes hearing Yankees talk, whether you hate them or you love them. They're always relevant. So the next question comes from Mel Schuster. Go Shocks. Give me more fantasy baseball, says Mel. We're going to try, and this is going to be the time to do it as we kind of creep into the heart of the summer. And I'll tell you, it's getting hot here. Orlando, is it getting hot there? It's like we're finally getting the 90s here. Orlando, you got to be 90 plus, right?
Yeah, let me tell you, I could have my AC on full blast around 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and you still wouldn't feel that it's full blast. You're thinking, and I just got a new car, so I'm thinking I need Freon or something's wrong with my AC, but that's how hot it gets on
it's just hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that feeling.
I still have my heat on. I'm still paying heating bills here. 40 degrees.
Why you're sick. That's why you're sick right now.
It is. I'm telling you. It's insane.
I understand that feeling, though, Orlando. Yeah, I understand. I keep thinking that every single summer that, like, damn, my air is going out, or I need Freon, or I need some of that cool air blast injection or whatever, because this air just ain't working. No, it's working. It's just 98.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that sucks. But anyway, that lets you know it's baseball time. But yeah, we'll try to give you more fantasy baseball talk, Mel Schuster. As far as your question goes, you must be a Red Sox fan, but here he goes. Huge fantasy baseball guy here. Enjoy this show. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. What's the outlook on David Price? Is he worth stashing? So this is a fantasy baseball question, Dan. I'm going to kind of refer to you. I mean, what I saw is end of the month-ish, and they had someone else go down, so they really kind of need him to step up as soon as he can. I don't know. Well, the only thing I could see was end of the month, and I haven't really been keeping up with the injury or injury status, so I'm going to defer to Dan on that. What do you think about Price, and is he worth stashing and holding on to, thinking he'll be coming back in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean, his injury is definitely concerning. Anytime it's an elbow on your throwing arm, I mean, that's never a good thing. You definitely have to keep him, though. I definitely would. Here's the thing. David Price is a great regular season pitcher. He's the worst postseason pitcher of all time. But fantasy baseball ends in the regular season. So if he can, if he can maintain his sub-3 ERA that he usually has in the regular season, yeah, I definitely think he's worth it. I don't think he's going to put up those ace-type numbers coming back from injury, but he'll be a middle-of-the-rotation guy that you can have a starting pitcher 3 or 4 on your team. I wouldn't expect David Price type numbers, but they're definitely going to be better numbers than what's available on the waiver wire or anything like that that's probably in your league right now. So I would definitely keep him, but temper your expectations. I know he's been able to soft toss and throw light bullpens. I read the same thing, shooting for a Memorial Day, May 29th and May 31st. Return. It might be a little optimistic, but even if it's mid-June, you're still going to have him for a few months. So I would definitely keep him, but don't expect him to be your best pitcher when he comes back right away from injury.
Yep. There you go. And I don't have anything else to add than that to that, other than that I did read that David Price helped raise funds to create a Miracle League park in his hometown of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which in Jonesboro, Arkansas, we have one of those that was just created in the last 2 years or so. The company that I work for actually donated money for that, and kind of owns the scoreboard for that, the nice big digital scoreboard for the Miracle League park. And it's a really great thing. It provides so many happy memories and just excitement for these some of these kids that normally wouldn't have that opportunity. So that's a great thing. And David Price seems like a great dude for raising that money and getting that started in his hometown of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So maybe that's even worth stashing him outside of just the regular season performance that he's going to eventually put up for you, as Dan said. So that's it. That's baseball talk. We probably ran over. We got to go. But Orlando Torres, what's that score on that Spurs-Rockets game?
You don't want to know, Brandon.
It's about to come back from halftime. 2 point. It's a hell of a game. The Spurs are down by 2, 60-58. But it's been pretty much neck and neck. I don't think any team has that more by 3 points. So it's close. It's going to come down to the fourth quarter. I'm already starting to bite my nails.
It's in San Antonio. This is game, what, 5 in San Antonio,
5.
right?
Yeah, game 5.
Dan, you got no chance. Dan, you got no chance.
Well, I think game 1, the Rockets did win in San Antonio, so I'm pretty sure there is a chance. And, James Harden exploded for, I think, 24 points in the first half, shooting over 65%. I like the chances right now, Brandon. So, I'm looking at your face, and you're like a deer in headlights. You're like, oh my gosh, Dan is so right.
All right, we just lost cool points for that response right there alone. But the Rockets are not going to shoot like that in 2 back-to-back games. That's why I'm saying this game is over, Dan. I mean, the Rockets, yeah, they went off in game 1 and went off in the last game, but that's why I was saying they're not built for the playoffs. They're doing extremely well, but you got to remember, San Antonio lost a legendary point guard, although, yeah, he is old and wore orthopedic shoes out there.
Rockets lost the legendary name in Nene. He's out for the postseason.
He wasn't even playing. Clint
He was
Capella.
playing a little bit. I saw him on the court.
Yeah, Clint Capella's got all those
Dreads
medals.
were up. Get him up in that pony.
Still, the loss of Tony Parker hurts, even though he was wearing big baller brand orthopedic shoes, which I think is what that is anyway. Hey, check out Dan's article. I'm so sick of this LeVar Ball conversation. It drug me in so bad today on Facebook, but Dan's got a why LeVar Ball is really smart article on the website right now from myfantasysportstalk.com. Other than that, what else is going on the website right now, Dan?
Just NBA draft prep. We're going to be getting that stuff out there. Started my player profile, so I'm looking forward to doing some more tape. I'm not.
It's not going to be as hard as the NFL either, because there's not as many picks in the NBA draft.
Right. Yeah, but it's also it's definitely different. I kind of know the ins and outs of football, so it's with basketball. I mean, it's enjoyable, but I have to focus a little bit more than I usually do. So I give out that accurate information, but something I enjoy doing. So that'll be going. Entertainment section's blowing up, coming out with all these movie reviews, television reviews, character battles. So definitely check out the site. We're getting loaded up on content leading up into the summer months. Yep.
No doubt. So check it out daily, all that going on. And of course, we're just going to be leading up into our NBA live draft show coming up June 22nd. And like as I mentioned before, also 1 week from today, May 16th will be the NBA draft lottery. So maybe going into next week's podcast, whenever we record it, we'll know exactly where those picks fall and maybe able to talk about about that and then a little bit more detail once we know where the picks fall. But we'll see. That's going to be it. But we'll continue that NBA playoff talk. Should be the beginning of the conference finals and the conference showdowns there. We'll continue our NBA draft prep as we get you ready for that big live draft show on June 22nd. And the NBA draft lottery, like I said, May 16th. So we're going to have that to talk about. Did the Boston Celtics really get that #1 pick? We'll talk NFL free agency and more MLB because that was fun. I love some MLB talk. Help me get better, guys. That's what I'm telling you guys. Help me get better. I learned a lot about the Yankees today. They'll be there. So don't worry about that. But Of course, we will answer your mailbag questions every single week, continue that next week, and talk about whatever else breaks in the world of sports and entertainment. Thanks for joining us live on YouTube. Check out the replays on YouTube. Check us out on iTunes. Check us out on SoundCloud. Check us out on SPN, Sports Podcasting Network. Check us out on WBLZ Sports, WBLZsports.com. And, of course, check out the website daily, myfantasysportstalk.com. Why go anywhere else for sports and entertainment? Doesn't make any sense, so don't you do that. I was hoping Ryan Thomas, but he didn't join us. Maybe we can catch him next time. But for the guys who actually did join us on the podcast, missed you, Ryan. But Orlando Torres and Dan Sharp, I am bringing you. See you next time. Later.